She said it as if she were handing me the check. "I'm leaving you, for my boss." Not shouted, not dramatic, just a whisper across creme brulee and candlelight, like it was some quirky footnote to our 12-year anniversary dinner. Like she wasn't detonating a marriage with the same tone you'd use to mention a canceled yoga class. My fork didn't even hit the plate. I looked at her, blinked once. The skyline behind her blurred for a second, as if the city itself had the decency to look away. Then she added, like a cherry on top of betrayal, "He's buying me a $2 million house. On the water." Oh, so this wasn't spontaneous. It was scripted, practiced, probably rehearsed in her head 10 times on the Uber ride here. She even wore the necklace I gave her 5 years ago. Must have thought that added a nice touch of irony. I nodded, polite as ever. "Is that so?" She leaned back, swirling her wine like she was the damn queen of exit strategies. I guess she expected rage. A scene. Maybe a tear or two, if she was lucky. Instead, I reached for my phone. "Mind if I send a file real quick?" She scoffed. "You do you." I did. A few taps. One encrypted message, routed through a little service most people don't know exists unless they've worked in compliance, intelligence, or exceptionally quiet revenge. 2 minutes later, her phone rang. Caller ID, R. Hawthorne. She smirked. "He's probably wondering how I'm holding up." And answered on speaker. What came out of that speaker wasn't comfort. It was panic. Explosive, throat-tightening panic. "Who the hell did you just tell?" Her face collapsed like wet plaster. I sipped my wine. 2009 Bordeaux. Goodyear. She ended the call, hands trembling. "What the F did you do?" "Me?" I tilted my head. "I just sent a file. You're the one who decided to read your breakup speech before the check arrived. This is where most people stop listening, right? Right when the drama kicks in. But if you're one of the rare ones still here, pause for a second. Over 90% of people hearing this story won't subscribe, even though it fuels the team that made this happen. If you're getting something out of this, consider hitting that button. That's simple. Keeps the story going. Keeps the fire lit. Anyway, back to the implosion. She looked like she was going to scream, then stopped. Her eyes flicked around. Other diners were watching. Not many, but enough to make her remember the thing she hates most, embarrassment. So she grabbed her clutch, stood up too fast, and hissed, "You'll regret this." I smiled, already marking it down in my regrets journal. Entry number 2, you. Right after eating oysters in Phoenix. She walked out, heels stabbing the tile like tiny declarations of war. I didn't move. I just looked down at my phone. The file had been opened. The compliance server had pinged back. Phase 1, complete. Let her think it's just a bluff. Let her laugh to her girlfriends about how weirdly calm I was. That's the thing with women like Jenna. They assume silence means defeat. They forget. Some men were trained to let their enemies talk first. Tonight, I let her whisper. Tomorrow, I begin the dismantling. Jenna didn't just storm out of the restaurant. She performed her exit. Chin up, back straight, phone pressed to her ear like a prop. I watched her reflection in the window as she paced along the curb outside, already reciting some sanitized version of what happened. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shocked. She was triumphant, like she'd finally cut the dead weight and expected applause. I didn't move for a while, just finished my glass of wine, paid the bill, and took the long way out. The valet handed me my keys with a nod I'd come to appreciate after a dozen quiet dinners at that same rooftop. He didn't ask where my wife was. He didn't need to. Across the city, Jenna was already telling her best friend, Marissa. He didn't even flinch. Just pulled out his phone and smiled like a freak. I think he's in shock. Marissa, who thinks corporate espionage is a skincare brand, laughed. That's the dream though, right? You get the house, the upgrade, and no messy tears. Clean exit. Exactly, Jenna replied. He's so cold. He's already over it. Honestly, kind of sad. They had no idea. By the time Jenna was back in their condo Googling backsplash ideas for her future kitchen, I had already checked into a quiet executive suite on the edge of the business district. Nothing flashy, just sterile enough to think clearly. I punched in the lock code for the suite's wall safe, retrieved a black pouch, and unzipped it. 3 USB drives. Each one matte black. No labels, no markings. But I knew them by weight. I'd had them custom milled by a friend in Zurich. One for each face. I plugged in the first. A folder tree popped up. Color-coded. Time-stamped. Jenna account transfers. Compliance triggers. Triarch Corp. Internal affairs thread. PDF backup. Each file had been curated over the past 11 months. Not with vengeance. With method. Her wire transfers through shell accounts. Conversations with her boss that bled into money laundering territory. Screenshots of Slack threads she didn't know were being mirrored through IT retention protocols. Even a few photos from a golf course meeting in Dubai she wasn't supposed to know about. Jenna always thought I was boring, stable, predictable. She didn't know that predictability is the camouflage of architects. And I wasn't building a revenge plot. I was building a controlled detonation. I opened the Internal Affairs folder and scrolled to the bookmarked section. Triarch Corp Non-Discretionary Bonuses. Audit Year 3. Right there, in a scanned document, was her boss's initials approving a bonus tied to a property acquisition, flagged with a red asterisk. Property was outside U.S. territory. Bonus dispersed internally. No outside shareholder notice. In plain English, they were hiding money to buy her that $2 million house. That made it actionable. And now, it made it mine. I scribbled something on a post-it note and stuck it to the top corner of the screen. Just 4 words. Phase 2 begins at sunrise. Then I closed the laptop, turned out the lights, let the silence sit. It didn't bother me. Jenna's voice had always filled the room with chaos. Endless loops of vanity disguised as affection. The silence was honest. It didn't pretend. What Jenna didn't understand, what most people like her never understand, is that some men don't explode. Some men engineer collapse. Quietly, legally, permanently. And by the time you hear the first crack, the foundation's already gone. The first clue wasn't some lipstick on a collar or a cliché perfume trail. It was far more modern and far more insulting. She left her iPad open on the kitchen counter. Not unusual. She used it for recipe videos she never cooked and Pinterest boards of home renovations she'd never start. But that afternoon, she was in a rush. Something about a strategy call she had to take from the car, even though it was Sunday and she hadn't worked weekends in 5 years. I wasn't even trying to snoop. I was reaching for the coffee grinder when a message popped up. From someone saved as GH. Subtle. Like a teenager hiding vodka in a Gatorade bottle. It read, Alan would never do anything. He's too boring. But keep pressure on the divorce. I want that house. It sat there, glowing on the screen. No guilt. No hesitation. Just strategy. And buried beneath the insult was a line that sliced deeper than she realized. Too boring to do anything. She thought stillness meant submission. She thought not fighting back meant I didn't see. I closed the iPad. Didn't confront her. Didn't even change my tone when she walked back in 10 minutes later, reeking of peppermint gum and a lie about traffic. That night, after she fell asleep watching some garbage reality show about millionaires who don't pay taxes, I went into my study, pulled out a legal pad, and started writing names. I wasn't angry. Not in the way she probably hoped. I was clinical. Cold. One name got underlined 3 times. Reginald Hawthorne. Her boss. I didn't know much about him then. Just that he ran some mid-sized strategy firm that ballooned during COVID and somehow stayed afloat when other sharks sank. But I knew enough to recognize the name when she slipped and mentioned RH in her calendar 2 months prior. Dinner with RH, 7 p.m., 4 Seasons. I asked, casually, who RH was. She blinked too fast. Oh, Robin. A client's niece. We're doing an outreach event. Right. Robin. Probably 6'4", with a Rolex tan line and a boat named after a Greek myth. So that night, I searched. Deep. Not Google Deep, Registry Deep. Pulled up federal contractor logs, offshore filings, and a few layers of shell structures only someone with clearance, or enough reason, would bother to untangle. And there it was. Reginald Hawthorne. Principal stakeholder, Triarch Strategic Holdings. Recent acquisitions, 3 waterfront properties under different LLCs. One of them, registered under Baybrush Capital Ltd., matched the specs Jenna kept showing me on Zillow. Same architect. Same city. Same Seaview lot. She thought she was whispering fantasies. She didn't know I was listening in compliance language. Then came the kicker. Baybrush Capital was under a federal monitoring flag, not public. But if you know how to look, you find the watermark in the wire logs. A silent flag. The kind that means someone, somewhere, was already watching. That meant her dream house wasn't just a prize. It was evidence. I printed the logs. 3 sets. One encrypted to a cloud drive. One in a locked drawer. One that would only be seen by someone I trusted. What Jenna didn't realize is that betrayal isn't always met with fury. Sometimes, it's met with record-keeping. And a paper trail so precise that by the time your hands are clean, the ink's already dry. So yes, I knew. I knew when she started coming home with stories too thin to poke and too confident to question. I knew when she started calling me sweetheart again, only ever right before she needed something notarized. I knew when she asked how our prenup handled inherited real estate. We didn't have any. But I didn't react. Because reactions are for amateurs. What I had in mind wasn't reaction. It was design. The woman in the cafe stirred her espresso like it offended her. No sugar. No cream. Just hot, bitter precision in a porcelain cup that probably cost more than a week's groceries. She looked over the rim of her glasses, thin, wire, academic, and said, in a voice that didn't rise above the room's ambient jazz, "Everything you sent checks out." Her name was Lauren. That's all she'd give me. No surname. No LinkedIn profile. Just Lauren. She wore gray slacks, no jewelry, and a wristwatch that ticked once every 3 seconds. The kind of person who didn't need to raise her voice because her silence did the job. She slid a folder across the table. I didn't touch it. Offshore flows, she said, flipping it open to a diagram. Structured through Cyprus, then funneled into a hospitality fund in the Caymans. Kicker is the Triarch expense accounts. They're logged as consulting, but there's no trail of actual consulting deliverables. Just lump payments, always timed around asset acquisitions. She turned the page. Internal kickbacks. Travel reimbursements. A condo in Dubai registered under an alias that just happens to match Hawthorne's mother's maiden name. Very quaint. I nodded. So you'll take it from here? Lauren didn't smile. No. We never take anything. We redirect. She paused, tilting her head. What do you want from this, Mr. Vance? 2 things, I said. To protect my portfolio and ensure my name is never mentioned. She nodded slowly, like a priest delivering last rites. Then you'll get both. You'll be anonymous. But Hawthorne won't survive this quarter. Are you sure? We don't build cases. We curate them. Like museums. All it takes is the right patron walking through the door. I paid the bill, cash. She left without saying goodbye. By the time I finished my drink, she was already a shadow in the elevator glass. That night, in a penthouse Jenna had never been invited to, Reginald Hawthorne opened his inbox. He was in silk pajama pants and a t-shirt from a yacht he didn't own anymore. Beside him was a half-full bottle of something brown and expensive, and a laptop that ran hot from too many browser tabs. The email subject line read, Osprey Financial Integrity, sealed notice, urgent. No sender name. No logo. Just a secure download portal and a time-stamped access code that would expire in 15 minutes. He hesitated, poured himself a double, then clicked. Inside was a dossier. Not a rough draft. Not a threat. A dossier. Name, Reginald Hawthorne. Affiliation, Triarch Strategic Holdings. Status, exposed, level 4 escalation. The file mapped every single transaction Alan had uncovered, and more. Things even I didn't know had made it in. Somebody had cleaned house. They'd tied Reginald's fingerprints to a string of asset manipulations, tax inconsistencies, and employee-level benefit fraud that painted him as less of a visionary and more of a well-dressed parasite. His hands started to shake. The $2 million house promise? Tied directly to a tax-deferred bonus routed through a shell company. One email thread even linked Jenna's name as a beneficiary in a consulting capacity, despite her having no credentials, no work output, and no documentation beyond a few dinner receipts. He reached for his phone like it was a lifeline, not a device. Dialed Jenna. She answered with that annoying drawl she used when she thought she was in control. Hey, baby. Can't sleep? His voice didn't wait. Who the hell did you tell? Jenna froze. What? You told someone. Who did you tell? What are you talking about? I didn't. Wait, are you drunk? But he wasn't listening. He was pacing now, knocking over a glass, grabbing his keys like it would help him outrun the data. And that's the truth Jenna never grasped. The call wasn't about her betrayal. It was about his panic. Because in his world, betrayal is negotiable. But exposure? That's fatal. 3 days later, the first crack showed up in a sentence buried halfway down a Thursday morning email from Triarch's internal PR team. Mr. Hawthorne will not be attending this quarter's board advisory session due to unforeseen obligations. Unforeseen obligations, in corporate speak, meant one thing: damage control. Then came the whispers. Quiet, clipped conversations in elevators. Slack channels suddenly going read-only. The CFO's assistant crying in a stairwell. The third canceled meeting in a row. No announcements. No memos. Just a mounting tension that smelled like blood beneath cologne. Jenna didn't know any of this at first. She was too busy posting Pinterest boards titled, Our Future Kitchen, and dragging real estate agents through hour-long tours of properties she couldn't afford on paper. The crown jewel was a $2 million glass and stone monstrosity with sunset access and dual infinity pools, because apparently one infinite body of water isn't enough for people who've never held a hammer. The The day before escrow was set to finalize, her realtor called. "Hi, Jenna. Quick note. We've had to pause everything for now. Something about a liquidity check." "Excuse me," she snapped. "Yeah, it's not you. It's the other party. They flagged a delay in funds release from the purchasing entity. Could be a simple compliance issue. Happens all the time." But Jenna knew. Or at least, she felt something shift. She called Reginald. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Then texted, "Hey babe, everything okay? Call me when you can kiss Mark." An hour later, he called. But the voice on the other end wasn't the smooth, dominant man who used to send her late-night winks over boardroom Zooms. It was cold, tight, fractured. "What did you say to him?" She blinked. "What? Who? You had to have told someone. What else did you say that night?" "Reg, you're not making sense." He cut her off. "Do you have any idea what was in that file? Do you know who I'm dealing with?" She paused. "What file?" He hung up. That was the moment she began to panic. She sat in the middle of her still-shared condo, phone in hand, unsure whether to cry, scream, or Google federal asset seizure timelines. Meanwhile, in a quiet building across the city, I reviewed a real estate transfer packet sent via encrypted fax. The purchasing entity? Cedar Row Acquisitions, LLC, a subdivision of a veterans housing trust I'd quietly funded for nearly a decade. All filings clean. All signatures dated before Jenna had even told me she wanted the house. The property in question? Right next door to Jenna's dream home. Not for me. I had no interest in sea views or marble countertops. But the trust needed a place for transitional housing. Safe, discreet units for discharged veterans trying to rebuild lives. And I needed one thing. Proximity. Not to her, but to the monument of her ambitions. To the structure she thought represented arrival, security, superiority. I wanted to own the land beside it, fund something meaningful, and let her wake up every morning knowing she traded a marriage for a view she'd never live in. That's the part they never see coming, the silent repositioning. The trap isn't sprung with a bang. It's a slow tilt. One day you're walking through marble floors with champagne dreams, and the next you're sitting in a condo that still smells like your ex's aftershave, wondering why escrow froze and why your boss keeps flinching at every email notification. Jenna always thought she was the clever one. She never realized that clever people play short games. But architects? We build structures. And I was just getting started. It started with a Tuesday morning blackout at Triarch HQ. Server downtime, access cards failing, internal comms frozen mid-sentence. No alarms. Just dead air and the quiet clicking of confused employees refreshing dashboards that refused to load. Then the real swarm began. Not security. Not even the press. Auditors. 6 of them. Badges clipped, sleeves rolled up, escorted directly to the executive floor by a third-party firm whose name no one could quite pronounce, but everyone suddenly feared. A name that didn't appear on any Triarch vendor lists because it didn't need to. That morning, Reginald's calendar got wiped. Entire meetings evaporated. His assistant gone. Legal counsel, called into a closed-door conference room with Osprey Financial Integrity printed discreetly on a privacy screen. By noon, HR began purging interdepartmental threads. Emails older than 2 years surfaced. Wire logs no one knew were being backed up were restored. Everything from performance reviews to bonus approvals now lived in a single, damning spreadsheet, color-coded and cross-referenced. By sunset, Reginald's hands weren't just tied, they were shaking in plain view. Compliance had everything. Vacation bonuses routed through real estate trusts. HR payoffs disguised as wellness subsidies. And worse, private communications to Jenna logged as internal correspondence, which opened a brand new category of liability, fiduciary misconduct via interpersonal favoritism. They couldn't prove it was her yet, but they could freeze her access. The notice came through email, curt and lethal. Effective immediately, Jenna Hart is placed on temporary leave pending a review of interpersonal entanglements and associated fiduciary risks. Jenna saw it at home, mid-latte, still in pajamas, expecting to approve backsplash samples. Within 10 minutes, she was in her car. 30 more, she was in front of my building. She didn't wait for permission, just stormed through the glass doors, past the stunned front desk, and barged into my temporary office like we were still playing house. "What did you do?" she shouted, trembling with the energy of someone who finally realized their exit plan had no exit. I didn't look up. I was annotating a funding proposal for Cedar Row. "You mean," I said slowly, "after you ordered dessert, or after you humiliated yourself trying to humiliate me?" Her voice dropped to that familiar venom-laced hiss. You think you're clever. I'll sue you. Everything you've done. This manipulation. It's disgusting. I finally looked up. Calm. Collected. Clause 14, I said. She blinked. What? I repeated it. Clause 14. Of our prenup. You had your own lawyer walk you through it. You were very proud of how you negotiated your social media carve-outs. What does that have to do with? I cut her off. Adultery and public disrespect. Either one triggers forfeiture of marital claims. You did both. You paraded your betrayal on our anniversary, which you celebrated on my dime. I pulled out a folder and set it gently in front of her, like placing a chess piece she didn't know existed until now. She stared at it. Go ahead, I said. Open it. She did. Her name was typed across the top. Bold. Formal. Voluntary resignation. Acceptance acknowledged. Signed and time-stamped by Triarch's interim compliance director. What is this? She asked, her voice smaller now. Your resignation letter. It's cleaner this way. No firing. No clawbacks. Just exit. Her hands clenched the folder. I didn't sign this. You didn't need to, I said. Your boss did. Turns out when someone's trying not to drown, they'll throw anyone overboard. Silence. No tears. No screaming. Just a flicker of something behind her eyes she'd never shown before. Recognition. That she had stepped into a game she didn't understand and lost before she even rolled the dice. I turned back to my paperwork. She stood there another 10 seconds, then left. I didn't watch her go. You don't need to watch a landslide. You just need to know where to loosen the rock. Jenna burst into her lawyer's office like a woman sprinting toward the last raft on a sinking ship. Hair tied in a sloppy bun, overpriced sunglasses crooked on her face, and fury radiating off her like static. She didn't sit, didn't wait, didn't breathe. Fight it, she snapped. I want the house. The accounts. Half of his retirement. The prenup was built for the old days. He wasn't this wealthy when we signed it. We'll challenge it. Her attorney, Richard Lowenstein, gray-haired, 5-figure retainer, and 3 divorces deep himself, lifted his eyebrows with deliberate calm. He motioned toward a packet sitting on his desk. I've already received documentation from Mr. Vance's counsel, he said. And others. Good, Jenna said. Then you know he's bluffing. Lowenstein exhaled through his nose, the way seasoned lawyers do when they're about to tell a client something they won't like, but can't afford to sugarcoat. Jenna, he began, slowly flipping open the file. You signed every single one of these. Clauses. Acknowledgements. Amendments. It's ironclad. The prenup alone shuts down most of your claims, but it gets worse. He tapped a page near the back. Your boss's name, Reginald, is on a dozen wire transfers tied to real estate purchases, including that house in Ridgegrove you've been salivating over. She blanched. So? That's his business. I didn't touch anything. Lowenstein gave her the look you reserve for a toddler who swears they didn't eat the frosting, while covered in frosting. You approved 3 expense reports for his travel, he said flatly, all tied to that purchase. You routed 2 of them through your department. You left your initials. You're on record approving consulting bonuses to a shell entity that, surprise, links back to that same property trust. I didn't know, she started, then stopped. He leaned back. Intent doesn't matter, Jenna. In the eyes of a court, you're not just sleeping with your boss, you're entangled. Financially, professionally, legally. Best case, you walk away with the jewelry he already gave you. Worst case, you're part of the fallout. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Something trembled in her hands. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was the cold truth finally cutting through the ego. And if I challenge it anyway, she said quietly. You won't, he replied. Because you'd lose. And because if I go forward knowing you've already been named in a compliance probe, I lose too. Silence settled over the office. Heavy. Final. She stood, gathered her bag without another word, walked out. From across the street, I watched her exit. She didn't see me, too busy fumbling with her keys, trying to call someone who wouldn't answer. Probably Reginald. Or Marissa. Maybe the realtor. I didn't care. I opened my phone and tapped a single message into Signal. Clear. It went to Lauren, the compliance officer from the cafe. 3 letters. That's all it took. Within minutes, Triarch's legal firewall would lower. Whistleblower documents would be escalated to regulators. The full financial picture would be delivered to the right desks at the right time, tied up in ribbons of metadata and timestamps. I didn't need to testify, didn't need to scream. The systems were already in motion. You see, people like Jenna never prepare for silence. They're too used to attention, too conditioned to believe that noise equals power. But I'd weaponized the one thing she never anticipated. Documentation. And now, The woman who tried to barter loyalty for luxury couldn't even convince her own lawyer to stay in the room. Poetic, really. She wanted a $2 million dream. She got a pro bono nightmare. The invitation arrived via a mutual friend, well, former mutual. One of those half-loyal socialites who still hadn't picked a side, hedging her bets in case Jenna pulled a Phoenix act. The email was dressed in soft apologies and fake warmth. We're putting together a small dinner, very low-key, no pressure. Jenna really hopes you'll come. She'd like to speak privately. The subtext was clear. Jenna thought if she orchestrated the stage, she could recapture control. Dim lights, clinking glasses, maybe a tear or two paired with some vague regret. And, if she was lucky, a photo someone could leak online that made it look like we were rebuilding. She wanted the illusion of a comeback. A redemption arc. I didn't respond. I just picked up the phone and called someone else. Steakhouse at 7? I asked. Sure, came the reply. Should I wear the badge or leave it at home? That night, I walked into a quiet corner booth at a place Jenna had never been invited to, partly because she'd always sneered at places without Instagrammable cocktails. Sitting across from me was Ethan Price, mid-40s, SEC liaison, razor sharp, and one of the few people I considered a genuine mentee. Years ago, I'd helped him navigate his first case involving white-collar fraud buried under charity foundations. Now he was 3 rungs above me in federal reach, and still brought his own pen to every dinner. He ordered the porterhouse. I went with lamb. Over bourbon, we talked about everything but the obvious. Until he broke the silence. You didn't burn it down, he said. That's what everyone expected. Big scorched earth moment. Headlines. Revenge press. I shook my head. No need. He tilted his head, amused. Why? I sipped my drink. They were already playing with fire. I just let the wind in. He laughed once, short, sharp. Damn poetic for a finance guy. I had time to work on my metaphors, I said. The ones who think they're invincible never check their own wiring. Just takes a spark. Across the city, in a more crowded restaurant with brighter lights and duller wine, Jenna sat alone at a table for 6. The 2 friends who were supposed to drop in had messaged her apologies. One blamed traffic. The other said her kid had a fever. Both lies. Neither followed up. The waiter approached her a 3rd time. Still waiting on someone? She faked a smile. He'll be here soon. He wouldn't. Instead, her phone buzzed. A news alert. Reginald Hawthorne steps down amid internal scandal. Subheadline. Triarch Corp launches formal investigation into financial irregularities, whistleblower claims. She stared at the screen. No text from Reginald. No updates. Just that sterile press language she couldn't even begin to unpack. Her dream house? Still frozen in escrow. Her bank's fraud prevention team had flagged an inquiry she didn't understand. Her lawyer wouldn't return her calls. HR at Triarch had sent a final letter. Pending conclusion of internal review, your leave status remains active. Do not represent Triarch in any external capacity. And now the man she sacrificed everything for was vanishing in real time. She set her phone down, looked around. Nobody recognized her. No one approached. No camera flashes. No curious glances. Just the quiet, embarrassing truth that the dinner she had planned was happening, just not with her in it. While she nursed a 3rd glass of wine and tried to rehearse a future that no longer existed, I walked out of my own dinner full, calm, and nameless in every headline. I didn't need applause. I had the silence. And the wind was still blowing. She looked like she'd been dragged behind the very car she used to brag about leasing. Hair tangled, sleeves inside out, shoes mismatched. Her knock at my door wasn't the crisp, confident rhythm I'd heard for over a decade. It was scattered, hesitant, almost human. I opened the door. Didn't say anything. She just stood there, eyes glassy and ringless, clutching her phone like it might still save her. Her voice cracked before the words landed. Just tell me why? Why all this? I stared at her for a second. Not with anger. Not pity either. Just the cold realization that I was looking at a stranger wearing a face I used to trust. I stepped aside. She entered without waiting. The condo was clean. Spare. Not a single trace of the life we'd shared. Even the paintings were different now. Less impressionist, more geometric. I hadn't changed them out of spite. I'd changed them because the past no longer deserved wall space. She hovered awkwardly near the dining table, the same one she'd once declared too sterile for entertaining. She didn't sit. I gave you everything, I said, voice low. Loyalty, stability, room to breathe, to grow. And you whispered betrayal over creme brulee. She flinched. It wasn't like that. It was just a fantasy. Something stupid. I never meant for it to go this far. I raised an eyebrow. The wire transfers weren't fantasy. The vacation reimbursements you signed off on? Not fantasy. The 6 Zoom calls you took half naked while I was working in the other room. I stepped closer. None of it was an accident, Jenna. You knew the value of what you had. You just thought you could trade it in for something shinier. Her shoulders shook. The tears came, finally. Too late. I walked over to the sideboard and retrieved a small envelope. Handed it to her. She opened it with shaky fingers. Inside, printed transfer confirmations. Every account in her name. Liquidated, dissolved, zeroed out. Retirement matchbacks, joint holdings, discretionary trusts. Gone. Returned to their origin accounts or converted into escrow allocations she couldn't access. Legally. Quietly. Permanently. Her mouth parted slightly, but no words came. I handed her a second envelope. Heavier. She opened it. Inside, the deed to the waterfront property. Her dream house. The one she toured 5 times and memorized the staging layout like it was scripture. Across the top was stamped a red watermark. Frozen, under compliance seizure. She looked up at me. Hello. I wanted a future, she whispered. I nodded. You did. And you picked one. I walked her to the door. This time, she didn't resist. At the threshold, I paused. You once said I was too boring to ever do anything, I said. But boring men don't leave trails. They leave ledgers. She turned her face slightly, like she might say something. But I was already closing the door. Click. Deadbolt. No shouting. No goodbye. Just the sound of heels walking away without rhythm. 6 weeks later, I stood under a shaded canopy in a quiet part of the city most people like Jenna never set foot in. The ribbon cutting was modest. No cameras. No speeches. Just handshakes, coffee in paper cups, and a few stoic men in worn boots and clean shirts. Veterans, standing beside units they'd soon call home. No press. No donors trying to buy redemption. Just community. I didn't take the mic. I didn't pose for photos. I signed a document or two, nodded at the project manager, and stepped back into the crowd. The building itself wasn't flashy, neutral tones, sustainable materials, simple architecture. But on the entrance wall, bolted to a concrete pillar, was a bronze plaque. In honor of second chances, given wisely. That was enough. Not the quote. Not even the building. The silence that followed. Because I didn't need recognition. I needed closure that wasn't staged in candlelight over creme brulee. And this, quiet dignity, applied where it mattered, was the only kind I cared about. Later that night, across the city, Jenna heard a knock at her door. Not a visit. Just a courier. A plain white envelope, signed for with a scribble and left unopened on her counter for almost an hour. She finally peeled it open like it might bite her. Inside, no threats. No legalese. Just a folded piece of linen stationery and one sentence, written in my handwriting. You left for a $2 million house. I bought the land beneath it. She stared at the words like they were written in fire. Her eyes darted to the window. Down the hill, where the framed skeleton of her future dream house once stood, the lights were off. No workers. No contractors. The scaffolding sat rusting, abandoned. The coming soon sign had been removed. The parcel was no longer listed in her name. It wasn't listed at all. No loans. No title. No trace of her stake in anything. She refreshed the permit website 3 times. No results. Then again, nothing. She thought she'd carved out her place in luxury. What she hadn't realized was that I'd been quietly purchasing everything underneath it. The LLC holding the property, the trust tied to the development firm, even the utilities authorization routing. All legally. All clean. All irreversible. She had the dress rehearsals. I had the deed. No one was returning her calls. Not the builder. Not the bank. Not Reginald. Who, last she'd heard, was somewhere between Dubai and litigation. And me? I was done. Done listening to apologies that only arrive after the spotlight turns off. Done defending myself against accusations designed to make her feel better. Done remembering someone who never really saw me. By the time she read that note, I was 3 hours away, watching the sun drop behind the hills outside a cottage built decades ago by my grandfather. The only sound was birds, and the slow shuffle of boots on gravel as a young vet opened his new door for the first time. Legacy isn't about what you own. It's about what outlives you. Jenna tried to secure luxury. I secured something else entirely. She still doesn't understand what she lost. I don't need her to.